Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to the Fanatic Forum. I'm your Fanatic and host, George Buehler. Hope you all are having a wonderful week out there. It's been a good one for me so far. So we're at the end of it, so yeah, it should be a good thing here. So I'm flying solo tonight here. No Seth this week. He's working some overtime at his real job there, so he's got to make that paper. So I don't blame him at all, seeing as we do this one for free and for fun. So yeah, go make your money, buddy. So he will be back very shortly, and so we're gonna delay the initial conversation we were going to have about our favorite superhero video games until when he comes back. So there you go. So you get just stuck with me for tonight. That's okay. Anywho, of course, a couple of geek things to talk about. Of course, I haven't checked this out just yet because I'm catching up on Reacher and Invincible over on Amazon Prime. But Daredevil Born Again has started on Disney Plus. I'm hearing good things from people, so I'm very curious to check it out myself. I haven't done that just yet, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm very excited about it. So I'm going to try to let a couple of episodes build up there, so I don't just get one. So maybe get like three kind of built up. So we'll see. But yeah, looking forward to that. One interesting thing on kind of the movie streaming apps. Not sure if you guys heard about this in the news or not. If you're a Roku user, whether you have Roku TV or device or whatever else, there was an app very briefly. It was on there for about a couple of weeks called Cinema Box. And Cinema Box had a lot of classic movies from about the 40s to about the 70s to come out of the cutoff there. It was really nice. It was nice free service, no commercials, whatever else. But the big standout, Star Wars was on there. And not only Star Wars, the 1977 cut of Star Wars. And I am talking about there was no New Hope in the crawl. James Earl Jones never got credit. Didn't get credit for Darth Vader's voice. Han shoots first. Even the friggin' stormtrooper bumps his head on the door coming into the control room when they find R2 and 3PO. All that's in there. The real original cut, the one I saw as a child, the one many of you all saw as a child, was on this streaming service. And the word got out, and people went out and checked it out. And then I guess somebody from Disney or Lucasfilm or whatever else got a hold of it. And not only did they remove Star Wars from it, the app itself is gone. So Cinema Box is KIA, which is unfortunate. But I was able to go there and check it out once, and it was just magnificent because it was a great cut of the movie. It was a really nice quality transfer of it. So it's like, was this kind of some kind of plant? Some kind of weird. I'm getting in my conspiracy theory mode here because, was this some kind of weird thing here that maybe we're going to get the original cuts of the original trilogy and Disney's going to put them out in some way, or I don't know. But yeah, I mean, like I said, this was because some people, may be confused. Later on, after 1981. George Lucas added A New Hope to the opening crawl for Star Wars. Because originally in '77, when it came out, it was just called Star Wars. No New Hope, no nothing. But then when we titled Empire Strikes Back and decided I'm going to give this one a subtitle, and so there you go. But yeah, so this was the original cut. Haven't seen this one in a very long time, so it was kind of wonderful to see it. So. Anywho, like I said, since I'm flying solo tonight, of course, we are going to do some comic book reviews here in just a moment. But we are going to be doing a Fanatic Favorites episode about one of my all-time favorite movies, 1981's animated classic Heavy Metal, based and inspired by the French magazine, later coming into the States in 1977. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about kind of some of the making of the movie, the segments of the film itself, the soundtrack, and somewhat of the legacy of the film itself. Because there is a sequel that came out, Heavy Metal 2000, that was basically done in the period where Kevin Eastman owned the rights to Heavy Metal, was kind of the editor-in-chief of the magazine itself. And so his wife at the time, Julie Strain, who was the model for the character that was kind of the lead for the movie itself. And then basically, of course, he did a comic, I think, in Heavy Metal itself called Fact 2, FAKK 2. And then basically Fact 2 was turned into Heavy Metal 2000 for the film. But it was just one entire story as opposed to being an anthology. So it's kind of something a little different. But yeah, there actually was going to be a sequel that was coming. Basically, at one point, it was being developed somewhere around 2006, and then it went as far as 2009. 2009 was basically the death of it. So we'll talk about that in a little bit here too. But yeah, there's a rich legacy for Heavy Metal, the film, and of course the magazine itself, and all that good thing. So. My brother from another mother, Mr. V. Salutations, Fanatic Guru. Thank you very much, sir. Good to see you. Oh, you got a question here? Yes, sir. So what do I think? Oh, there we go. Yeah. So yeah, another thing in the news here. Gotta talk wrestling just a little bit here. Elimination Chamber last weekend. Of course, it was a fun event. Lots of good things going on there. We saw the return of Jade Cargill, the return of Randy Orton, but most importantly, after 20 plus years of being a good guy, John Cena turned heel and is now, I guess, going to be The Rock's champion or a lackey of The Rock and somehow. But yeah, that's big news. We've kind of wanted to see this for a long time. They've teased it from time to time here and there, especially when Cena was feuding with Bray Wyatt. You had the segment where, the WrestleMania match they had where John Cena was going through all the different phases, and we had like an NWO John Cena. So they've always kind of teased it. Fans have always kind of wanted to see a heel John Cena. But yeah, we got it. And that was a really well-executed segment. Just the whole way it went down, where basically Cody tells Rock to go F himself, which he said it. They didn't bleep it. It was on a pay-per-view, so they could do and say kind of almost whatever you want. And then Cena's all laughing and hugging Cody and stuff like that. And then basically he the face turns and Cena just drops the smile. It was so well done. Looks at Rock. Rock gives him the cut sign, and then boom. So yeah, that was a really well executed segment, well done. And that's the best thing too is like at the press scrum right after Elimination Chamber. If you guys didn't see this, Cena comes out for an interview, sits down, pulls the mic out from under from the stand that it's in, and drops it, and then walks out and says nothing. So I think Cena's going to do his first promo this coming Monday on Raw, I believe. I think it's his next appearance. So they're going to be live in Madison Square Garden. Yeah, we're going to be very curious to see that first John Cena heel promo. I would love to see the old Doctor of Thugonomics come back a little bit, where he does like the rap promos a little bit, or kind of does some cuts people down a little bit. So I don't know, man. We're in a good place right now in wrestling, especially in the WWE. So yeah, WrestleMania's gonna be fun this year. Oh, it's gonna be fun. That is for sure. Oh man, so I think that's all I had for big news. Oh, this was an unfortunate thing. Actually, I literally just read this before the show. So the Gene Hackman situation. If you guys have been catching up with that, of course, Hackman and his wife passed away a few weeks ago. It's been kind of under investigation. Things are kind of been a little suspicious. We thought possibly there's carbon monoxide poisoning, something along those lines. As it turned out, it's a little more unfortunate than that. Basically, his wife was also sick, apparently. Gene was having some heart issues and was also suffering from Alzheimer's as well. So what had apparently happened was Gene's wife passed away rather suddenly, and basically said she was found in the bathroom, I believe. His wife had passed away suddenly, and then Gene was alive for another week, kind of in a state of confusion because, again, the Alzheimer's. And so, yeah, that's so apparently I think he ended up dying from a heart attack or whatever else they end up doing. So a really sad, tragic ending to such an outstanding career is just, truly unfortunate. But yeah, that's what, I just read that right before the show. I was like, wow, you can't write that stuff. But yeah, so Yeah, very, very interesting stuff here. So, all right. So we're going to break that up a little bit here. Started to bring everybody down for a moment there. But yeah, again, like I said, later, our big topic of discussion, heavy metal. But first off, I do have some new comics here. And yes, TDV, I did grab the whole stack at once here. But we're going to show the books one at a time. That's how we're going to roll here. A few from last week I want to share since we were on the show, so I definitely want to check but you guys to check these out here. The whole Absolute series that's been happening with DC has really been on fire. My favorite of the series of the three that's been out so far is Absolute Batman. It's been great. Absolute Wonder Woman takes a very, very close number two, almost tying with Batman. You're dealing with a Wonder Woman who in this universe, because of course is an alternate universe outside of the regular DC universe and their own continuity, this Wonder Woman was essentially there is no Themyscira. The Amazons are all dead or killed, perhaps in some way. So Diana was essentially raised in hell by a woman called Circe, who essentially is a sorceress, and in the regular continuity is one of Wonder Woman's greatest villains. But Circe ends up being her mother. The beautiful thing about it that though the place that Wonder Woman's raised in is terrible, Diana still shines through. So like there's even a cute scene in the series where you kind of have flash forward to her being an adult on Earth doing her thing, and then her time in hell being raised as a child, where she's basically like cuddled up in bed, her mom's reading a story, and there's essentially like all these monsters and demons kind of all huddled around Diana, like cuddling up and sleeping next to her, like they're her pets, like her cats and dogs and stuff like that. But these are all things that would be normally terrible monsters, but in the hands of Diana, they're cute pets now. So there you go. But yeah, this is the issue 5 is the end of the first arc of the storyline here. This has been a lot of fun. Essentially, Wonder Woman comes to Earth, to the world of man, so to speak, to essentially fight giant kaiju. She's armed with a lot more magic than in traditional Wonder Woman senses, a lot more weaponry that she's had before, and just really, really cool stuff, really well written here. So it's Kelly Thompson and Hayden Sherman do the main art. Jordi Belair does backup for the art as well. But yeah, just an absolute fun book there. So if you like Wonder Woman and you like people fighting big kaiju with giant swords, there goes my mouse, with giant swords and other sort of magical ephemera and whatnot, yeah, you need to check out Absolute Wonder Woman. That's for sure. Next up on the list here, set these over here. G.I. Joe number 314 from the IDW Larry Hama run here. So this continues the continuity of G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero that essentially started in 1981. Took a bit of time off for about 25 years, and then Larry Hama brought it back to IDW Comics, continued it for about another 150 issues, and then at issue 300, left IDW, comes to Image Comics, continues it with 301, and there you go. So this has been the same continuity. This has been a nice kind of palate cleanser issue because recently in G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, we've been dealing with a 3-sided war on Cobra Island between, obviously, G.I. Joe and 2 different factions in Cobra. One that is led by Cobra Commander, once again, and another side led by Serpentor. But this Serpentor is not the same one that we've known before. That one was killed previously. This is a new clone of Serpentor, as opposed to being made up of multiple world leaders and great generals and whatever else. He's made up of only one general, Genghis Khan. In the process of Serpentor's leadership, he manages to mutate himself and his entire army with some sort of, device he was going to use, and basically G.I. Joe foils the plans, and essentially Serpentor and his crew get mutated. Cobra Commander and his crew leave Cobra Island for a time, then essentially come back. Now you got this 3-sided war in there. You mix Destro in there. So issue 313 of G.I. Joe has an outstanding fight between Destro and Cobra Commander. mono a mono, and it does not disappoint. So we get this one issue almost kind of working as a special missions issue where you've got terrorists kidnapping a young girl who's basically the daughter of a politician. And so you got basically a small Joe team, including Tunnel Rat and a couple other new Joes that basically do the rescue mission, find out there's a little bit more meat on the bones, this sort of thing here. Maybe there's an undercover op they bust, that sort of thing like that. And so, yeah, basically the mission gets a little bigger than it actually seems to be. But yeah, there's a nice one-issue palette cleanser. And then next issue for 315, we get to the aftermath of said Cobra War. So, yeah, the Energon Universe G.I. Joe that basically is incorporated with Transformers and the Void Rivals comics, that's a completely different thing on its own, a completely different world. This is literally back to kind of basics G.I. Joe sort of thing like that. So if you followed it in the 80s, you loved it then, even if you checked it out with the IDW run, this Image series, it does not disappoint. Not whatsoever. All right. Before I get to my next one, I got to get to a couple comments here. Oh, Mrs. Fanatic Michelle Kessler Buehler saying hello from upstairs. Hello, dear. Good to see you. And she says, "Yo, Joe." I love it. Oh, we're good to see you. Yeah, she's literally right upstairs. Yeah. Oh, I missed this comment from V talking about elimination here. Says WB is cooking. Absolutely, 100% WB is cooking. Oh, you're waiting for those Batman pick of the week. Well, there is no Batman pick of the week this week. There was no Batman book this week anyway. I should not take it back. Batman Full Moon came out. But no, I'm there's no DC stuff this week, surprisingly enough. But my next pick, and this is another one that came out last week here, but I'm going to definitely fill you guys in. The Savage Sword of Conan, issue 7. Good Lord, this was a fun issue. So your main storyline, you got classic Conan writer Roy Thomas, who's written Conan for 40 plus years. A new to us, this may be an old story to Roy. He may have written it years ago. It's based off of Rudyard Kipling's story. It kind of his bit of a take on it involving Conan. But then you get the great art by Roberto De La Torre in here. So probably one of my favorite issues of Savage Sword. So that storyline takes over the majority of the book. Then you get an article talking about Conan's involvement in the upcoming new DLC pack for Mortal Kombat 1. So you get to see what Conan's design is and kind of some of his moves and what he could do in the game. The design for Conan is a little bit of a cross between Arnold and comic book Conan, kind of just a little more heavy on Conan. I even commented to somebody, looking at it, it almost kind of reminds me of Ralph Moeller, who played Conan in the syndicated television series. He almost kind of looks more like him than he does Arnold. But nonetheless, you get Conan in Mortal Kombat 1, so I got a feeling I'll be checking out Mortal Kombat 1. The next story, though, is you get another done by Pat Zurcher and Evan Hernandez, doing one of Robert E. Howard's more obscure characters here, which is basically kind of a Yukon, territory, early 1900s explorer, adventurer, whatever else that basically has to win the hand of his love, and by doing so, he has to kind of undergo almost like a Herculean sort of challenges he has to overcome here. So it's a bit of a tall tale sort of feel to it, but it's a lot of fun. Pat Zurcher's writing is really good. The art is outstanding as well. So just an overall, just a sweet, fun issue of Conan, Savage Sword of Conan. Of course, some great pinups in here as well. So just, yeah, I absolutely love the return that Titan has done with Savage Sword with the regular Conan book. So just every issue is a welcome treat. My next book here, and this is a new one for this week here. This is one that got delayed a couple of weeks. It was supposed to be released 3 weeks ago, but due to Diamond Distribution's issues of bankruptcy and being late for the past several weeks, all that kind of good stuff, this book's been delayed, so it finally came out. But in the vein of Space Ghost, we now have the Herculoids coming out from Dynamite Comics here. And this is, this is not the A cover. This is one of the variant covers by Philippe Massafera, which I absolutely love this cover here. This, of course, is based off the Hanna-Barbera series from the late 60s, early 70s, about a family living on a bit of a paradise planet, so to speak, that has kind of like a bit of a Stone Agey sort of feel to it, but it has, a great wealth and resources and minerals and all kinds of things that bad guys would love to mine and steal from them. So basically, the family, which is, of course, the father and husband there and the son, and of course, all of their animal friends here. So you got like the giant stone ape over here. You got a triceratops that also shoots rocks out of his horn. You got Gleep and Glutes or Gleek or Gleek and Gloop or something like that, which they're kind of like these like amorphous blob shapeshifters, but they're like the cute, funny, they play with the kids, sort of thing like that. But also, if they need to turn it on and get dangerous, they can get dangerous. And then, last but not least, everybody's got their own pet, a fire-breathing dragon, and so the Herculoids also do as well. So that is essentially what the premise of this book is. Essentially, bad guys come to the planet to want to basically steal everything they can find and get, and the Herculoid family protects the planet from them. So the approach to this first issue is almost from the point of view of the pirates themselves coming in and hearing tales and myths about these, these people that possibly could be a danger, or protectors of the planet, whatever else. We don't believe those stories, I think. And of course, they get there, and then they get their asses handed to them. So it's a lot of fun, a great setup. To me, I really equate it to Dynamite Space Ghost series that's currently running, I think about 10 issues in right now, where you get like the nice nostalgic kind of feel if you remember the old cartoons, but it also has just a tiny bit of a grown-up feel, not so much that it's distracting or would turn off a classic fan, but just enough because, just enough to be just a little more grown up, and yeah, just a lot of fun. I can't wait for it. I think I'm going to be picking up all the Philippe Massafera covers because he's doing multiple variants throughout the series. So I absolutely love his work here. Let's show it off one more time there. So, and of course, there's foil variants as well of this. There's virgin foil variants. So yeah, Dynamite loves themselves some variant covers. So there are multiple versions of this book, this cover, and many other covers that were available for issue 1. But yeah, if you're an old Hanna-Barbera fan, if you like the cartoon, if you like just good sci-fi, kind of little fantasy adventure comics, whatever else, or maybe something that you would be interested in, but something maybe you would be comfortable showing your children or whatever else, that's the way to go. I also recommend the Space Ghost book for the same reason. The Johnny Quest book that's out. I'm not a Johnny Quest fan. I haven't read that. I've heard good things about that. As a matter of fact, there is a Space Quest book coming out, I think it's just a few weeks here, that's a crossover of Space Ghost and Johnny Quest. So, yeah, all your Hanna-Barbera dreams are coming true for this one here. So, anyway. Lots of fun stuff there. Next week is going to be a very heavy DC week. There was a bit of a mistake with the distribution for Clobber & Comics, the shop I work for. So we didn't get any DC books this week. So we're going to get 2 weeks worth next week. So yeah, I got a feeling new book day is going to be very heavy. Anywho, so for our topic of this evening here, got to bring up heavy metal. Just absolutely, again, one of my absolute favorite movies here. This is an animated anthology film, if you're unaware of it. This is based on the 1977 magazine of the same name, originally a French magazine that basically the name in France literally translates to heavy metal. So there you go. In 1977, National Lampoon, who, of course, the makers of their magazine, and they were responsible for Animal House and Stripes and Vacation and, lots of, Van Wilder, all kinds of stuff like that. So they wanted to kind of get a little deeper in the magazine business, and they kept hearing all this buzz about this awesome sci-fi French, or French fantasy magazine called Heavy Metal, and with really trippy art and mature themes and nudity and all kinds of stuff like that. Just every young boy's dream to get in a magazine where it's like, oh, I can do a sci-fi or fantasy story. And there's boobs, that was fun and exciting for people. But pre-internet, or if you don't have any access to Playboy magazine or anything like that, then there you go. Outside of National Geographic, you probably weren't seeing a lot of nudity as a young child, but there you go. So heavy metal was kind of your avenue for that, but it was also a great avenue for classic artists like Frank Frazetta, Jack Kirby, Bernie Wrightson, Richard Corbin, and then basically for American audiences to discover Mobius and Jean Girard and multiple Japanese artists and just other people from around the world that we were not exposed to before. Heavy Metal is the magazine that did that. So the National Lampoon decides they're going to buy the magazine, and in '77 the first issue was re-released in the States. So it was kind of like a Dragon Ball sort of situation where it's like the States was behind Japan in the release of the show. The United States was behind in the release of and according to France, in the release of the magazine. So they were like a couple of years into the magazine, and we were just getting the first issue, 2 years late. But what we, of course, did get is this menagerie of mind-blowing art, sci-fi, fantasy stories, all kind of like a bit of a what-if sort of tilt. There was no superhero kind of stuff. You're getting kind of regular people thrown into outrageous situations sort of thing. So it was really, art and stories that no one at the time had ever seen before. So, and it was also a great launching point for a lot of up and coming artists and writers to get their foot in the door in the business, to basically just be known. It made a lot of careers and inspired a lot of people basically to go on and do art and do stories themselves, whether they were into comic books or they became filmmakers or artists themselves, in other mediums, whatever the case may have been. So heavy metal inspired quite a lot. It's gone through several different iterations. At the moment, we were supposed to see a return of heavy metal about 3 years ago from Wizards from the Coast, who produced Magic the Gathering and are now the owners of Dungeons & Dragons. They had bought the rights to heavy metal. We're supposed to release a brand new series. We're all raring to go. Nothing ever happens. So a lot of the makers of heavy metal and some of the people who were behind the initial re-release that didn't go through decides they're going to crowdfund it and see if they can get the first issue off the ground. They do, and then now, basically through proper distribution, we see the relaunch of Heavy Metal #1. So that'll be coming out in about a month now. Look at your local comic shop for the return of that. I'm sure it will be with today's artists and writers and the of a massive talent that there is. I'm sure there's going to be a wealth of great people who want to sign up and check this out. And that's kind of what the movie all came about to be here. So flash forward to 1981. Ivan Reitman decides, because he's at this point kind of the head of National Lampoon. At the time, he is basically directing the film Stripes, and decides, heavy metal is getting to be popular as a magazine. It's kind of, it's still counterculture, but it's still popular enough. Like, let's make a movie. Let's do like a big anthology. Let's do a bunch of different stories, different art styles, all kinds of stuff like that. Really showcase what the magazine's all about in a film sort of format. Well, then after kind of some thinking and whatnot, they realize we're going to essentially, there's no, outside of Disney in the United States, there's no one studio that can handle something like this. So they instead decide to employ multiple studios around the world to essentially handle each segment. And so you've got studios in the United States, studios in Europe, especially in France. You've got Japanese studios all over the place here to get all the different segments taken care of, all under the direction of Gerald Potterson, who this was his first film. So Ivan Reitman's kind of the producer of the whole thing here, and Gerald's kind of overseeing the completion of all the different segments and how they're all working out. But yeah, this is his first movie, and this is the way he tackles things here. but yeah, it's just outstanding what it is here. The principal screenplay for the film is done by Daniel Goldberg and Len Bloom. Of course, both these guys are National Lampoon's guys themselves. And that's kind of the interesting thing about heavy metal is that the magazine itself also involves a lot of comedy and a lot of dark comedy. And very ironic comedy as well, which at the time was very popular in the 70s and 80s. So it all kind of just fit into the zeitgeist. And so you get, for the film, you get a lot of comedic actors. And of course, you recognize actors like John Candy, Harold Ramis, Eugene Levy, Joe Flaherty, who coincidentally, all four of these guys were members of the Second City comedy troupe. And all of them were friends of Ivan Reitman. And currently at the time, Harold Ramis and John Candy were working on Stripes. Matter of fact, for all of John Candy's voiceovers he did for the film, he would leave the set of Stripes, go do voiceovers for heavy metal, and then go back to the set of Stripes and whatever he was going to do there, for the day was done or whatever else. So yeah, so John Candy was a working dude in 1981, working on basically 2 films simultaneously. And it's not like John was in one segment. John's in, let's see here, 1, 2, 3 of the 8 segments in the film. He's in 3 of them. So yeah, so yeah, he's a busy guy. But to break down the segments here, we start off the film here with the segment called Rough Landing, which basically involves essentially a United States like spaceship, like a Challenger space shuttle, dropping a astronaut who's driving this Corvette onto a planet. Like he's literally like being launched from space, has to go through afterburn, sort of things like that. Lands on the planet perfectly, drives home to meet his daughter with a gift for her, and it's this green orb. And as soon as he lets out the green orb, it immediately disintegrates him. And we now are into the segment called Grimaldi. And Grimaldi, of course, is the name of the astronaut who brings this orb, and the orb identifies itself as the Lochnar. It is the embodiment of all evil. And so it is now terrorizing this young girl here and showing her the ways of all his evil and how his influence has gone throughout the ages and whatever else. So this essentially is our segment that kind of like is our our bookend segment here, kind of what essentially ties the whole movie together. The Lochnar shows up in every single segment of the film in some way, shape, or form. So, and of course, whether it has a major role or a minor role, in whatever case it is, the Lochnar is always there to influence it. And so, why it is torturing this girl and showing her all these things here, what purpose it has for, we don't know just yet, but we will find out later on. Our first segment we get to the film here is one of my favorites of the film, Harry Canyon, which is a film noirish sort of segment where you've got a cab driver basically gets turned and kind of roped into this whole first he rescues a girl, and then there's kind of this archaeological dig that went wrong that unearthed some sort of great treasure or whatever else. And of course, the treasure is the Lochnar. People are fighting over it and double crossing and all sorts of things like that. So Harry helps out the young lady. They even have a little bit of intercourse later on to the tune of Journey's Open Arms, which we're going to get to the soundtrack a little bit later on here. And of course, in later, not to really spoil anything here, but Harry gets double crossed by the young lady here as well, but still manages to worm his way out. But as you can tell by Harry's appearance, he's just basically kind of a very slovenly, everyman sort of guy here, very tired with the world, very weary sort of thing like that. So a great kind of protagonist for this sort of film noir, futuristic sort of thing like that. A good mystery, sort of thing like that. But going back to some of the design of the film, as you could kind of look in the background here, kind of what 31st century New York sort of looks like. If you think that, hey, this kind of reminds me of The Fifth Element, you would be correct. Fifth Element was very much influenced by this film. Even Blade Runner was influenced by this film because Blade Runner came out a year later in '82. So yeah, there's a lot of influence. Excuse me, a lot of influence that this film had, in particular, to future projects, future films, whatever else. Just in the multiple different segments, some of the things they did. Also, if you notice the film too, if you're familiar with Mobius's art and Jean Girard's both art and his writing, you get some really good detail, but kind of like a softness to it as well, to the faces and to the humans. And then when it comes to the detail of the city, to the world, it is hyper detailed. You've got everything, in here. The stones, the streets, and everything has got detail to it. So this is actually based on it's an original story, but it is also based off of The Long Tomorrow, which is a story that Mobius did for Heavy Metal that was reprinted in the American re-release. So yeah, definitely a Mobius kind of feel to it. But yeah, just a great kind of film noirish, real kind of surly sort of character here, but happens to come out on top there. The next one, and this is, of course, another fun one here, based off the Richard Corbin book, and, of course, the stories were reprinted in Heavy Metal. I'm talking about Den. Den is the story of a young teenager who is basically a bit of a science geek. He's on Earth trying to do different experiments and essentially opens up a wormhole that sucks him through this fantastical, world of, just and ripe adventure and whatever else. The trip itself turns the young 14-year-old kid, scrawny kid, whatever else, into this muscle-bound, titan of a man here, who basically beats up the bad guys, wins the day, hooks up with a couple of buxom broads. So it's like it's every young boy's fantasy dream here to go to a magical land and be a tough guy and beat the bad guys and win the lady and whatever else. So yeah, that's what Den is all about. The Richard Corbin, the original series of the story that's done, is treated very seriously. Basically no comedy to it whatsoever. But for the film, they decided, you know what, we're going to get John Candy to do the voice for Den. So he basically does the voice of him as a teenager, and then does kind of like a different, big, strong man, kind of voice there for Den when he transforms. But then you get this running commentary of kind of like Den's inner thoughts. His inner thoughts are still his teenage mind. So you get this great running commentary and delivery from John Candy throughout the film, or throughout the segment here. So yeah, it really kind of gives a nice contrast to the ridiculousness of the whole situation by adding a little bit of comedy in there. But again, since this was based off of Richard Corbin, the artist went with a lot of heavy cell shading to match like the really dark, heavy lines that Corbin does with his art here. So very much a stylized, very particular, recognizable style of Corbin's art. He, of course, does a lot of fantasy, a lot of horror stuff. So it was just a great showcase for him. So yeah, there you go. Like I said, it was they didn't necessarily base it off one particular story. They kind of did a bit of a remake of the origin, but yeah, like I said, throwing in a lot of comedy there as well. So the next one here, this is based off the Bernie Wrightson story of Captain Stern, and that's Stern with two N's. Now, Captain Stern, while he may look like the very heroic space captain here, captain of a starship, he is basically the galaxy's biggest scumbag and criminal. So he is currently in this scene on trial for a litany of terrible crimes that he has been accused of here. And the great thing is that he's got this very kind of, powerful kind of, booming voice like this, but it's Eugene Levy who does his voice. So it's like he doesn't even sound like Eugene, but it's absolutely Eugene Levy that does his voice, and it really works. And then Joe Flaherty is the voice of his sniveling lawyer over here, who doesn't believe that Stern is going to be able to get away with all of this stuff. But if you find out in the film that Stern has an angle, and the angle is one of the defendants who's a plant and some chaos and whatever else run from there. But of course, you get a lot of this great creature design as well from the very bored and frustrated audience at Captain Stern and his antics and what else has been going on. But yeah, they really borrow from a lot of Bernie Rice's design for Captain Stern, which again, that was the great thing about this film, is that everything that you saw in the film was stuff you could see in the magazine as well. You just had to essentially find the right issue for it, but there you go. Thank you very much, V, saying this is all very entertaining. I appreciate that, man. Yeah, and there's more to come. Wait, there's more. A very cool segment that should have happened that basically would have happened right after Captain Stern and would have bridged in the next segment was a segment called Nowhere Land. And Nowhere Land was done by Cornelius Cole III, basically a singular artist. And it was essentially a silent animated piece that basically he's a painter. And so everything was painted art, just beautifully done. And initially the project was, when he was doing this, he had set the animation to the Pink Floyd song Time. But later on, when the film was initially going to get released, it was set for a different song that was a Italian opera. I would tell you the name of it, but my Italian is horrible, so I'm not going to butcher the language. But it's a very recognizable piece. You've heard it in a lot of horror films, especially like The Omen and stuff like that. So we recognize it from that. But anywho, the scene ended up getting cut for time because it was such an outstanding piece, such a wonderful piece. But as far as pacing goes, it stopped the film dead in its tracks. But what happens is that not to spoil too much there, because if you ever buy the DVD or the Blu-ray, you can see that scene once again. That's on there. There's also a bit of a rough cut too, to see some other cut scenes from there as well. So I definitely highly recommend picking that up. But the scene essentially transitions Captain Stern into the next scene, which again, another one of my favorites, B-17. B-17 is a World War II story where you've got B-17 bombers flying through the night on basically on a bombing run. The Lochnar collides with one of the bombers and basically starts slowly turning the people who died on the plane and are still dead on the plane into zombies. This is written by Dan O'Bannon, who, of course, we know from Alien fame. He wrote the original screenplay for the original Alien and many other things. But yeah, essentially turns a World War II film into an EC comic. So you get the pilot of the B-17 manages to escape the plane because everybody else gets killed on the plane, either from gunfire from German other German planes or German surface to air stuff, or either by the zombies themselves on the plane. So the pilot manages to escape, lands on an island, finds out the island is essentially a graveyard of other planes that have wrecked on there, and guess what else is on there? More zombies. So it's one of the shorter segments of the film, but it is awesome. And of course, to the tune of Don Felder's Taking a Ride on Heavy Metal, it adds even more to the segment itself. So, and I haven't really talked much about the music in the film just yet, and I kind of really need to do that. The soundtrack for Heavy Metal is outstanding. You have some score work by Elmer Bernstein primarily, and a couple of the basically in the bookending segments and the final segment, Tarna. You got the Elmer Bernstein score, which is kind of what a lot of fans of his and fans of orchestral music say is kind of one of the great lost scores, because I agree, it's an outstanding score, especially in the Tarna segment. It's just a beautiful piece, and it kind of is lost to time because it doesn't appear on any soundtrack, and as far as I know, they haven't done a score soundtrack for Heavy Metal, just the music from it. The music, on the other hand, you have Journey, Black Sabbath, Cheap Trick, Sammy Hagar, Don Felder from the Eagles has 2 songs on the soundtrack. As I mentioned, Stevie Nicks is on there, Grand Funk Railroad, Devo is on there twice. So yeah, you got all these great bands of the day that they wanted to be on this thing. You've got a couple of French bands on there as well. A band called Trust is on here. Riggs as well. Then of course you got Nazareth, who that's another well-known American band, or they're British band. Anyway, but yeah, so tons of great music on the film, on the soundtrack, all used very smartly in the film. Basically it's kind of just a great thrill ride. It doesn't let you go. It's very exciting, a lot of stimulating going on there. But the wonderful thing about it is that you get so many different art styles in the film, or different techniques. Like they use a lot of rotoscoping in the film, which is basically actors who are shot on film, and then it is essentially art is drawn over that film. So you get a completely different style of movement. They say that Ralph Bakshi essentially kind of innovated at his time at Disney, and then brought to his films he did with Wizards and the Lord of the Rings and Fire and Ice, for his work that he's done. So you get a lot of rotoscoping in there. You get a lot of early CGI is in the film as well. I mean, we're talking very primitive stuff. Even before some of the later 80s films we saw that kind of use early CGI. Very primitive stuff there. There's a tracking animated shot, because basically they essentially do like those models that go everything. I forget what the process is called, where essentially everything's painted black and there's white lines that are put in for detail. But then when it's shot, it's reversed. All the white lines are now black, and then basically you can paint over all the landscape and whatever else. So there's a tracking shot in the Tarna segment where you basically get like her flying on her winged bird creature sort of thing like that. And yeah, it's going over an area. You go into the fortress itself. You're flying in like a mile, in a certain area. So you get, a lot of different perspective shots and multi-layered stuff in this here. So yeah, just so many different animation styles. Of course, popularly, when the film came out, I think it had like a $9 million budget, ended up grossing like $69 million in its initial run. So it did very well. Critically, it was kind of up and down. It was criticized for being a bit juvenile and kind of a young male fantasy, which, yeah, it is. There's no doubt about that. So I'm sure there may be some female fans. I know there are some female fans of heavy metal, but there's a lot more male fans of heavy metal. Let's put it that way. But yeah, so it kind of it got poo-pooed for being a bit sexist or misogynistic or whatever else. But yeah, it's basically young male fantasy sort of thing like that. But it was very popular on the midnight movie circuit. Right alongside seeing like Clockwork Orange or The Wall or Rocky Horror or whatever else. Very popular. Folks would get stoned and go to the movie, or they would get stoned while watching said movie and whatever else as they did this, because it definitely is a movie that allows for that. There's a lot of great animated sequences, especially in the next one we're talking about here, So Beautiful, So Dangerous, which is another, starting off in the modern day, where you've got basically a top scientist at the Pentagon is talking about the existence of aliens, and they're on our planet. They're coming to, get information from us and whatever else. And as they're having this thing, this giant ship, which just dwarfs the size of the entire area you're seeing here, lands and basically sucks up this guy talking in like a kind of like a big vacuum tube. And in the process, takes this poor woman who's also a receptionist, and puts them on said ship. You find out the scientist guy was an android plant who was malfunctioning and whatever else. And so the young lady who was essentially a secretary gets involved with the guys on the spaceship here, who is this friendly little robot here that John Candy does the voice for, and the two pilots here. Harold Ramis is the green fella. I can't remember who the pink fella is here. But basically, these two guys are essentially the Cheech and Chong of the spaceways. Because once they take off from Earth and are going back to their home, whatever space station they live at, they decide to set out some plutonium Nyborg, which basically kind of looked a lot like cocaine. And the two guys with their big nostrils proceed to go to town and get super duper stoned. And then you get your nice little animated sequence that involves a lot of like mixed media, rotoscoping, some really different, cool animated shots as they're traveling through the spaceways. And of course, while that's all going on, young secretary and the robot are having a little bit of kinky sexual fun here and forming a nice little relationship. So again, this movie is all over the place. It's very irreverent. Yes, people are going to have sex with robots. There you go. That's going to come up later. We'll talk about that in a moment here. Yeah, so this one definitely leans into much more of the comedy more than anything else. Our spaceship gets to the space station they're supposed to get to, but since the guys are a little bit baked, they don't quite make it without causing a little bit of damage to the space station they're landing in here. So, but again, this segment's all for comedy here, but just some great animated sequences here and just some fun comedic performances. And then we get to our final segment here, and this is the big epic one here. This is Tarna. Now, the situation with Tarna is we have kind of a post-apocalyptic world here where the Lochnar lands and essentially pollutes the earth. And when it happens, it mutates a bunch of the people in the area and turns them into these mutated bad guys. You know, they're not like zombies or anything. They're just basically, they're mutated and they're evil. Everybody gets yellow skin and red eyes and a penchant for killing everything. So, so they basically go to kind of the main palace, and it seems that this basically the people that lived on this planet or wherever else were kind of ruled by like a scholarly science sort of class, and the Terrakians were the female protectors, and so essentially in times of need they wouldn't defend themselves, they'd let the Terrakians do it for them. Well, at the time, the Trakian was a little late showing up, and so basically everybody gets killed by the mutants, and so now this is a story of revenge, and that's where we get Tarna in here. So Tarna is introduced. She gets her battle duds there, her sword, and then mounts her steed here, which is kind of like this, like, you know, pterodactyl bird sort of thing like that, but that's her basically her loyal steed. Flying around, and like I said, we get a tracking shot wherever else. The interesting thing is that Tarna is mute for the entire film. She does not speak, and it has very much a Clint Eastwood Man with No Name sort of thing like that. Like, she does a great scowl, goes in looking for the people who killed these, you know, peaceful, you know, scholarly people, and she's not afraid to whoop a little ass. So that's, you know, again, she doesn't talk, whatever else, but she goes in, finds out the information she needs. If she doesn't get it or somebody crosses her, then they're getting their head cut off. Also, in this scene here, you get a cameo appearance by Devo as the band who's playing in the background, playing their song Through Being Cool. And then, of course, later on in the credits for the film, you get Devo's cover of Working in a Coal Mine as well. So, like I said, we get two Devo songs. But the best part for this Tarna situation is the beginning of this film, because the beginning of the film, of course, like I said, you get the Lochnar lands on this planet, pollutes the thing, pollutes the people, and then suddenly they decide they're going to kill the ruling class, and the scene of them slaughtering the ruling class is to the tune of the Black Sabbath classic, The Mob Rules. And this was, of course, in the period where Ronnie James Dio is fronting the band, not Ozzy Osbourne. And interesting thing about Mob Rules. So many of the, I would say more than 80% of the soundtrack for heavy metal were songs actually written for the film. A couple of them were songs that were recycled or songs that, you know, have been on other albums by other artists or whatever else, but most of the songs were written for the film. Or in the case of like Sammy Hagar, he recorded heavy metal years ago, early in his career, well before he was with Van Halen. But then he decided to re-record the song for the film. So basically, it was kind of him. And he changed some of the lyrics as well. So yeah, so basically, he re-recorded this here. But like the Don Felder songs are new, Stevie Nicks' song is new, Cheap Tricks, both their songs are new as well, and as is Black Sabbath. So, and they were essentially in the process of recording their follow-up to Heaven and Hell, and got the opportunity to do a song for heavy metal. They knew the segment they were going to do, and kind of got the script and like, oh yeah, we need to do like something that's just going to bang, right? And so they basically gathered together in this remote castle in England, very kind of spooky old castle, lots of history to it, whatever else. And in an interview, Ronnie James Dio talks about the recording process. Like, there was just something in the air that night. And so the version of the Mob Rules they recorded for the heavy metal soundtrack is a different version than the one that actually appears on the self-titled Mob Rules record, which was the second record Ronnie James Dio did. The heavy metal version is a faster version. It just feels more intense, like they almost were watching the scene of the film as they were doing the song or performing the song. So it's like it mashes with it perfectly. And then Dio says when they decided to actually start recording the album, and like, well, we're going to do we'll re-record Mob Rules for the record. And he's like, they could recreate what they did for the heavy metal soundtrack. So yeah, again, like, you can listen to both versions. They are decidedly different, with the heavy metal soundtrack version being a much more energetic recording of the song. So it's very interesting. And like, just, the same band couldn't do it twice. There was some magic in the air that night, right? Anyway, so back to Tarna here. So Tarna's on her mission of revenge. She catches up with the mutants, and at first they capture her and her steed. They torture Tarna, but she manages to tough it out and escape, and then basically wallop everybody, including the main bad guy, in very short fashion here. So, and then Tarna basically kind of does almost kind of this He-Man-ish sort of pose with raising her sword in the air, and some big electrical, a big electrical energy happens, and it destroys the Lochnar on this planet. And now this brings us back to our basically our bookending segment here with the girl and the Lochnar here, who's on Earth and basically is being terrorized, shown all these different segments or whatever else. The Lochnar, as each segment goes, is getting more and more unstable. And then basically after Tarna essentially defeats all the mutants and does her big electrical energy release with, like I said, the He-Man sort of pose, and releases all this energy, it almost destroys the Lochnar. And in the process of this, the girl escapes the house and then suddenly is confronted by the basically the bird creature that Tarna was riding in the previous segment. And now you realize that this young girl is now the next generation of Terrakian protector, because you see, like, there was a tattoo that Tarna had on the back of her neck that identified her as a Terrakian. This girl also has that same tattoo. It's like almost like a birthmark sort of thing. So the whole thing was basically just kind of preparation for her to be the next protector, to basically save us from whenever the Lochnar returns, or whatever evil sort of graced us from this land here. So yeah, just a really cool concept, and everything else. And so basically you get the nice kind of Elmer Bernstein score music kind of wrapping things up. And then the cool thing is that when we get to the credit sequence, like I said, you get Devo's working at a coal mine that closes things out, and then you basically kind of get almost kind of a reprise of everything. You see a bunch of stills from all the different segments as you're seeing the cast and crew who worked on each one. So you kind of get reminded of everything that happened in the movie. One of the interesting things you find out, of course, in some of the making of and some of the making of the film itself, there was going to be a different framing sequence, and not just the girl being tortured by the Lochnar. Basically, it was going to be that her father, the astronaut in the original segment, kind of takes her to this place. It's like this carousel. The carousel is powered by the Lochnar, but each ride on the carousel represents something within each segment of the film. And once again, as each segment goes on, she grows stronger. She gets more connected to the world itself. Even to the last segment, when Tarna is getting tortured, she is actually feeling Tarna's torture, and then you realize there's a bit more of a connection between her and the Terrakians, and of course it still does end with her flying off on the winged bird steed and being recognized as the next Terrakian, the next protector. So the artist who was responsible for this first segment and kind of the all the other framing sequences essentially was taking too long with the animation. It was another artist who was going to handle everything himself. And so to the point where Ivan Reitman, the producer of the whole thing, essentially threatened to not pay the artist if they didn't complete stuff. And so that caused a lawsuit. It causes further delays and yada, yada, yada. So basically, he was essentially just let go from the project entirely. And a Japanese artist was hired to essentially do the new framing sequence, which starts off with Soft Landing, which again was a mixed media sequence of an actual person driving a Corvette that was dropped into like a desert sequence and drives the seat, basically driving off. And then, of course, this was put back into the animation. So starting us off crazy, with this, first segment here of mixed media, rotoscoping, all different kinds of, styles of animation that were used. Some were familiar, some were not familiar at the time. So that's just kind of just the wonderful thing about this film is that just so many different styles. It's such a journey, such a process. Of course, you got, like I said, if you're a rock fan, you're an old school classic rock fan, the soundtrack is great. I myself am such a fan of it. I celebrate the soundtrack all the time, listen to it on a regular basis, love the many songs from it. So yeah, there's just so much of a celebrate of the film itself, such a great representation of the magazine. And actually, it did help the readership for the magazine as well. It kind of kept it going for many more years. But then, of course, like I said, eventually the movie kind of faded at the time. It still had its fan base. It didn't have too much of a second life, honestly. It did have a re-release in the late 90s. So it did get a bit of a new audience in the late 90s with a remastering of the film. And Sony had a new audio mastering process they want to kind of test out for this one. So the re-release film, they kind of dubbed it as louder and nastier than ever, sort of thing. And I mean, it sounded great. I remember that much. So it did get a brief theatrical re-release as well. So kind of a bit of attention was brought to it. It finally got a VHS release because throughout the 80s and the early part of the 90s, you couldn't find this on VHS, or this, of course, predates DVD, because Ivan Reitman was sure that we had all the music rights intact in perpetuity. So when they wanted to release the film on home video or future releases on film or whatever else, they had everything, all the rights, and everything was good to go. Alas, did not. So while the soundtrack was readily available, has never gone out of print. You could buy it today if you'd like to, on digitally, or you could buy it on CD, or I think you can buy it on vinyl. The soundtrack was available. Movie was not. So it was bootlegged for years. You could see it like in midnight movie showings, whatever else. But yeah, for a long period of time, this movie was not able to be found until literally the late 90s. So then you get your first VHS release, and then later on DVD and Blu-ray. When time came out for that. So it's definitely worth getting and checking it out, because there are some great extras on the Blu-rays and DVDs, and so definitely some other stuff worth looking out. So flash forward now to the late 90s, early 2000s. Heavy Metal Magazine is now owned and run by editor-in-chief Kevin Eastman of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fame. So he brings a little bit of a second life to the magazine, and then decides that he's got kind of a long-running story in there called Fact 2, which is spelled FAKK2, that Simon Bisley does the art for. So very much kind of a warrior woman in the future sort of thing, like that, very similar to the Tarna storyline. But the model for Fact 2 is Julie Strain Eastman, who at the time was Kevin Eastman's wife and also model and actress herself, and a very famous scream queen of the late 80s and the 90s throughout. Very statuesque, very powerful looking woman here. So perfect to play the role and kind of be modeled after. So later on, they decide they're going to do a Heavy Metal movie, an animated film again, and they call this one Heavy Metal 2000. And it literally is just an adaptation of the Fact 2 storyline. So it's one story as opposed to an anthology. So you get a little bit of a second life of it in film. It's a good film. Nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't have quite the charm of the original. And of course, because there's no comedy in it, it's just a straight, sci-fi fantasy, big mash 'em up, a lot of action, whatever else. So, like I said, worth checking out if you're curious, but again, not as much of a classic as the 81. Flash forward to the next kind of legacy for heavy metal. In around 2003, David Fincher, who directs Seven, Fight Club, Alien 3, many other films, decides that he wants to do a new heavy metal film. And at first, he wanted to do the whole thing by himself, and again, want to kind of do, anthologies, but do different stories. And then a later iteration of the film would have had like Fincher do a segment, Guillermo del Toro do a segment, Peter Jackson was supposed to do a segment. Trying to think who else was involved. There's a total of like 5 directors were all involved. Basically, they were wanting to do animated sequences, another anthology with kind of a tying thing together, but sort of kind of recreate the 81 sort of spectacular. Unfortunately, by 2009, the project was dead in the water. They really, really tried to get this off the ground. This was going to be Fincher's baby for a long time, and it never happened. But what ended up did happening in its wake is we do have somewhat of a bit of a sequel, kind of a bit of a cousin to heavy metal. And that's the Netflix series Sex, Love, and Robots, which is an anthology series, all animated sequences, all different types of animation, a lot of CGI, a lot of like video game cut sequence animation is being used in this stuff, all sci-fi, fantasy, a lot of comedies thrown in. Yes, there is some, adult content as well. Yeah, I mean, not like horrible kind of stuff, but, a little bit of nudity and things like that. But again, this is kind of our next generation of heavy metal through an entirely different title, but it's the same medium. And I think they've gone through, I think it's like at least 2 or 3 seasons on Netflix. So worth checking out. And then the same people did the series for Netflix, have now moved to Amazon Prime, and the series called Secret Level, which is again more of a this one is more kind of for the video game cinematic sort of fans, because all the animation in this series, again, anthology sort of stuff, but it's all video game style of animation. But again, worth checking out if you're an animation fan, you like your kind of darkly tinged sci-fi and fantasy, whatever else. But yeah, so Sex, Love, and Robots and Secret Level are kind of your next generation heavy metals now. So those exist today. You can watch them now on Netflix and Amazon Prime, respectively. And so there you go. There's your little synopsis and whatever else diatribe on, one of my all-time favorite movies, heavy metal. If you've never seen this, check it out. It is definitely of its time. This is not a movie that could be made today. Not just because the animation styles of today, I think, are all kind of very uniform. You don't really see a lot of, variety and a lot of like really pushing the envelope. Every now and then you do. Of course, the Oscars this year. What was the name of the film? Was it Flow? This is a film that I would definitely highly recommend checking out. I need to see myself, but just from looking at it, I'm like, this looks amazing. So this is kind of this isn't, a Pixar kind of thing. This is a Disney thing. This is something that's kind of doing something a little different, pushing the medium a little bit. Of course, you still get this in anime as well, with a lot of pushing the medium and trying different things. So there's still quite a lot of legacy of heavy metal and, far out animation. So, but yeah, I believe heavy metal is currently streaming on Prime. If not, or at least you can rent it. Of course, I think there's multiple versions on YouTube as well. But yeah, highly recommend checking it out, rocking out, and just having a grand old time with it. But that is about all I've got for you guys on the Fanatic Forum this week here. So thank you all so much for those of you who joined us here. Thank you very much to TDV for coming in here and giving some nice comments there and getting us started on the John Cena topic here. I had a fun moment during one of my comic book streams earlier this week where some of my streams where I'm selling some of the discount books essentially kind of offer a lot more conversation than some of the other more busy streams. So we get to hang out a little bit more, chit chat, into odd conversations, and literally 5 people in a row like would come into the room, just coming in. They didn't hear me say anything before. They're just popping in, and all these people want to know what I thought of the stuff that happened in Elimination Chamber with John Cena going heel. And I'm like, so I had to kind of keep changing my answer just so I wouldn't completely repeat everything I said for the people who were still in the room. But yeah, V was there, and so now he's going to ask me every time what I thought about John Cena turning heel. But I welcome it. So thank you guys for tuning in tonight here. Basically, I love y'all having the fans come in here and sharing your passion, sharing your stories, and your comments, and whatever else, because the Fanatic Forum is the place for geeks. It's the home for all things geek here. So share, pass the word, spread the love here. Let's get more people in the forum here and all the good stuff here. So you guys have yourselves a wonderful weekend, and we will see you next time on the Fanatic Forum. And I will check with my junior Fanatic and see if he'll be available to us next weekend. So we'll see. But you guys take care, and you all have a good one. Bye-bye.
My name is Mark Weiss, and I am the founder and president of an organization called Comic Books for Kids. 6 years ago this month, we embarked on a journey of passion and heart. Our goal was to make a difference for children in hospitals and cancer centers. Little could we have ever imagined the response we have now. Starting with just hopes and dreams, we had no money for our mission. We had no product to give to the hospitals, and we had only called a couple hospitals and asked them, if we were to provide you with comic books, would you be interested? And they said yes. So we embarked on a 1-year journey to make a difference for these kids. We realized that even though we can't take away the reason these children are in hospitals, we can perhaps, while they are there, let them fly like a superhero, be princes and princesses, and embark on a mystical and magical journey to take them away from where they are in that hospital bed. Today, and thanks to your support, we are thrilled to say that we are now the largest charity in the U.S., supporting well over 200 hospitals in all 50 states for not only comic books, but for other pop culture items like Funko Pops, action figures, coloring books, Spanish bilingual items, backpacks, and more. When we received materials that were inappropriate for the young ones, we started a sister charity called Comic Book for Troops. And overnight, we became the largest charity in the U.S. for these same items to all branches of the military. We want to thank our friends for providing us their support and for allowing us the means to make so many happy with their gracious give to us.